You can add your own resources to the library if the resource you need isn't already in the software. In this video, I'll show you how to create a new resource by copying an existing one. I'm going to use the example of adding a type of timber cladding to the library. Although I'm going to demonstrate how to add a material resource, you can add labour and plant resources in a very similar way. To add a resource, you need to go to the BuildingWorks library. Click on the library at the bottom of the Project Explorer. Click on the arrow next to Resources to expand the Resources folder. Click on the arrow next to Material to expand the Material folder. Then open up the appropriate folder to locate a resource you can use as a template. Select a resource similar to the one you want to create. The resource you add will appear in the same folder as the resource you're copying. You can click the Show Details tick box at the bottom right of the screen to see the properties of the resource. Have a look at this information to check you've chosen the most appropriate resource to copy. Once you're happy you've selected the best template resource, click on the Resources tab on the ribbon at the top of the screen. Then click the Copy button. The Copy Resource window opens up. Double-click on the bar at the top of the window to make it full screen. Now you need to work your way down the window, updating the properties of the resource as needed. As a rule, you need to complete all of the fields which contained data in the original resource. Fields which are greyed out and have a padlock symbol next to them cannot be changed. The key properties you need to check and update are the various names, the normalizer type, and the resource unit. If the size fields had data in the original resource, you'll also want to update these fields. I'm going to work my way up from the bottom. Let's start with the names. Firstly, the dimensionless name. Dimensionless means the pack size is not included in the description, so you don't need to include the volume of a paint tin, or the sheet size for a sheet material, and so on. For my cladding, I'm going to use the format of the existing resource and set the dimensionless name to 19 by 135 European Oak Shiplap. You can include a brand name here if appropriate. Copy and paste this name into the name field. For some resources such as paint, insulation or fixings, you would include the pack size within the name. This isn't necessary for my timber cladding as it's bought by the metre. Now copy and paste the dimensionless name into the unbranded name field. If you'd used the brand or manufacturer name in the other name fields, you would change the name to something generic here. For example, Celotex could be described as PIR insulation. It's important to fill out the resource names carefully, as in the reports, BuildingWorks uses some name fields in conjunction with quantities which use the whole pack size, for example the total sheet size for a sheet material. Other names are used in relation to quantities which use normalised usage units, for example square metres for a sheet material. Moving up, the resource unit is the unit of supply. My cladding is purchased by the metre, so I can leave that as it is. Some materials are supplied by the pack or the square metre or individually, which we call each. Labour and plant resources are usually supplied in units of time, days, weeks and so on. Now let's look at the normalizer fields. First let's think about the normalizer type. As cladding is used to cover an area of wall, the normalizer type is an area measurement. Again, I can leave that as it is. If the resource you're adding is estimated by the metre, the normalizer type would be linear measurement. If the resource is estimated by the cubic metre, the normalizer type would be volume measurement, and so on. You'll notice that the normalizer unit is locked. That's because it's based on the template resource you selected. The normalizer unit, in other words the unit used when calculating the usage, is square metres for cladding. For skirting board, the normalizer unit would be metres. For concrete, it would be cubic metres. Now let's jump up to the normalizer. The normalizer is how much of a normalised unit, the unit used for estimating, is covered by the supplied resource unit. So a 1 metre supplied length of cladding will cover 0.135 of a square metre of wall. BuildingWorks will use this figure to calculate how much of the resource is needed to cover the area of wall and how much it will cost. You can also select a colour and texture to set the appearance of the resource in the 3D model. Once you're happy with the properties of the resource, click Next. The next screen prompts you to select a merchant. Leave this set to Me. This is your own resource, so you will be responsible for keeping the purchase price up to date. Then enter the purchase price for the resource. The oak cladding I'm adding is £12.50 per metre. You'll notice that the unit here matches the resource unit on the previous screen. Once you've set the merchant and price, click Finish. Your new resource will now appear in the library, in the same folder as the template resource. You'll see, to the bottom right of the resource, BuildingWorks has calculated the rate per estimating unit, or normalised unit as it's known in the software. So for the cladding, we're shown a square metre rate of £92 per square metre. It's always worth doing a quick sense check by looking at this figure to identify any mistakes. There is another way of adding a resource. You can also add a resource by clicking the Add button. When you add a resource in this way, you're creating a resource from scratch. None of the fields are auto-filled, so you'll need to carefully set each property. Of course, once you've added your resource, you'll then need to open up the specification of the appropriate estimating calculator and select the resource. I'll quickly show you how to do that. Click back onto the project on the Project Explorer. Locate the estimating calculator which uses the resource you want to swap and click on it to open it. On the Dimension Linked Specified Items tab, expand the assembly containing the resource you want to swap. Expand the appropriate rate and locate the resource you want to swap. Click the adjacent Swap button or right-click on the resource you want to swap and click the Swap option. A warning pops up explaining that the resource you're swapping will be swapped in every component within the estimating calculator. In this cladding example, every wall within the timber-clad estimating calculator will use the cladding I swap in. Click OK. Find your new resource, click on it to select it, and click OK. Your selected resource will now appear in the estimate, and the costs will be updated accordingly. So that's how to add resources to the library. Open the library, locate and click on the resource you want to use as a template, then click the Copy button on the Resources tab. Fill out all of the properties of the resource, including the names, normalizer fields and resource unit. Select Me as the merchant and enter the price of the resource. Once you've done that, open up the estimating calculator, drill down to find the resource you want to swap and swap in your new resource.